first step is really understanding where we are and how healthy we are so we can make good adjustments within the firm and then make really good hiring plans based on where we are and where we can go. This is kind of how you avoid the pitfalls of hiring way too early or avoiding the like not making the hire. And it's understand your firm's health and the model so that you can then make good educated decisions that are really well calibrated in data.
All right, this is not a lecture. What we are showing you today is the exact hiring model that we run inside of our law firm. It's the same model that took us from 2 people to now over 80, which is kind of wild to think about how far we've come. My name is Tyler Dolph. I am the CEO of Rocket Clicks. We are a hyper-focused family law firm only marketing agency that was built out of Sterling Lawyers. So very excited to be here. With me today is Tony Carls, who is the co-founder of Sterling Lawyers. He built the waterfall, the operating system that has grown Sterling to over $20 million in revenue, and the engine for this whole hiring process. So he's going to teach us step 1 today. And then Todd Clower, we pulled our CFO out of the day-to-day of the business and the law firm. We forced him to present to all of you today. So we got to give Todd lots of love for agreeing to be on this with us. Today is about whether you can hire and when you should, right? So the first 2 boxes are check and forecast. That tells us whether we should hire at all. And then the last 2 boxes are find and protect. That tells us when. Again, this is the exact system that we use. So step 1 is all about checking your firm's health. And I'm going to hand it over to the guy that built the system, Tony Carls. Thank you for being here. Take it away.
So yeah, the first step is we have to identify where we are at the firm. So before we kind of jump into looking at the waterfall a little bit, I want to identify kind of the most important figures that if you're not tracking, we need to start tracking. This is going to give you an unlock for you the downstream impact of being able to forecast from using the waterfall method that we've talked about in the past. And there are several important metrics that you need to be tracking. So the first one is monthly revenue. It's pretty basic. So the way we built these is how do we create this so that anybody who is building any size firm can operate this easily. So we didn't want to make this overly complicated. What is my monthly revenue target that I'm trying to hit? So it's a really important number for you to be able to identify what are you trying to accomplish each month of the year. Second one is what is your average case value? How much is the actual value of the case from a lifetime value perspective? So not what's your retainer, it is how much is the case actually worth on average. So that's all of your cases. So if you do $3 million a year and you did 100 cases, your average case value would be $30,000, right? So like that's kind of what we're looking at. What is your average case value? And then how long does it take your average case to get through from start to finish? That is your case length. What is your average case length? So those 3 numbers are really important to start identifying what your forecast model is going to look like, because it's going to be used to predict what is your, how many cases are flowing into your system, how long will they be there, and then the 4th metric is how many total active files can your team handle at any given time? So this is not the files on the board. Typically in family law, you're going to see between 40 and 60 is what an average attorney can typically handle. That would be their full on the board caseload. But how many active files are they actually working, and what is their actual individual capacity? Because what we're trying to identify is how many files are going to be coming into the system that we can sustain in a good way, because that's going to help us identify our capacity number. And if we can identify those 4 metrics, our monthly revenue, our average case value, our case length, and then our active file count per attorney. So like how busy can they all get? We're going to get a capacity utilization rate that's going to help us identify when we should start hiring. And then the triggers are built basically off of the waterfall within the hiring process, which is when should we start posting the job? When should we start recruiting and expecting to do interviews? How long is it going to take us to onboard a certain type of attorney versus others in terms of like their talent and experience? So everything is waterfalled in my world. And this is kind of how we've built built the system is like, what are our triggers? So Tyler talked about our Moneyball webinar where we really went through the waterfall method, and it's what everything's based off of. So it's the overall health of your firm. What does your lead flow look like, and how many of the users that are interacting with your brand in the marketplace are turning into potential conversations, whether those are phone calls or web leads? What's the quality rate of those interactions? That's going to dictate how many sets you can set on any given interaction. Then how many of those shows turn into actual quotes that we can deliver to clients, and how many of those actually close. That's going to give us really a health scorecard. So this was part of the toolkit from the Moneyball webinar. This is an expanded toolkit that we're going to deliver to you after we kind of go through and teach this a little bit. And what it's going to show you is, here's the monthly targets that we aim for at the firm. Those are all the black cells, and they identify what we've identified as kind of industry standard benchmarks to aim for each of those throughput items that I mentioned on the previous slide. So how well are we doing that? So you just have to enter two numbers. The first one is your monthly revenue, which we just talked about. Second one is your average case value, which we just talked about. And then that's going to output for you all of the targets for all of those other numbers. How many users should I have on my website? How many inbound calls should I be expecting if I'm performing to target? And then you can input your actuals where you actually are performing and see where your opportunities are for growth and optimization with your current flow without spending any additional dollars. Just where are our opportunities to optimize so that we can grow our firm without spending more money, just having intentional effort. So those are really the first step, is really understanding where we are and how healthy we are, so we can make good adjustments within the firm, and then make really good hiring plans based on where we are and where we can go. Because if we're really overperforming in one of these metrics, say we're closing really, really well over the last 4 months, but the rest of our waterfall isn't necessarily performing in a great way. If we decide to make a hire and then our closing dips, we might have the exact same number of case files coming into our firm, and then we just made a really bad hire. So not knowing where our firm is from a health perspective, or where we're like way over indexing, and it would be a bad assumption to assume it's going to continue that way. This is kind of how you avoid the pitfalls of hiring way too early, or avoiding the not making the hire. And it's understand your firm's health and the model, so that you can then make good educated decisions that are really well calibrated in data. So Todd's going to kind of take us through kind of what we do next with this.
Awesome, Tony. Thanks. I'll just echo some of the things that Tony said. I mean, it's super important for you as a firm and me as a CFO to understand where the business is, right? And that's a key metric that you have to know. And the waterfall is a fantastic way to do that. That's one thing, though. Actuals are the past. It's history. It is what it is, right? What I'm going to talk about a little bit today is, where are you going, right? What's your forecast look like? How are we going to take this business to the next steps, right? What do you want to do better? What do you want to do, more efficiently, more effectively? And specifically today, how do you determine when you're going to hire people? So I'm going to run through a couple key slides that talk about some of these forecast variables, and then we'll get into a quick demo of how it works and what the levers are that we can pull in it. So if we go to the next slide, we can kind of see the three main things that we look at in this forecast model. Number one is caseload, right? What is caseload? Caseload is split into a couple different formulas, and I have those here at the bottom. Monthly caseload, monthly total case files, funded agreements times your average case length. So Tony talked about those, where we have to know those couple inputs. We get that gives us our monthly case files. Caseload capacity, kind of the flip side of this, right? How many attorneys do we have? How many active case files can they each do, right? That'll give us what our total caseload capacity is. So if we know those two, those are the main things that we have to know in order to determine what caseload is. From a people perspective, those metrics that we just talked about on caseload will tell us how many attorneys do we need, right? If we have more cases than we can handle with our average attorney caseload file, that tells us that we got to hire, right? So we got to hire an attorney. What do we have to do for paralegals, right? Obviously, paralegals support the attorneys very well and very, substantially. Here at Sterling, we say 2 to maybe 3 attorneys for each paralegal. So if I'm hiring one attorney, I'm probably not going to hire a paralegal. I'll probably wait till I hire that second one. But it's somewhere in there, right? And it depends on the type of attorney. If it's a high performing attorney, maybe you're only going to have 2 attorneys to that paralegal, but you might also have 3. Next one is intake. Intake is truly based on call volume. So all those metrics that Tony kind of pointed out on the waterfall kind of show, hey, how many calls am I going to get, right? How many interactions am I going to have? What we tend to do is look at that on a monthly basis. You divide it by the work days, right? Say 20 days in a month. And then divide by about 25-ish calls or interactions that an intake person can handle. The output of that's how many intake people I have, right? So that also drives off of all of those same metrics that we talk about. The fourth category is specialized support. So this is people that support the paralegals. So it does not include paralegals. It includes people like, back office, accounts receivable, billing, HR, all that kind of stuff that kind of support the entire team. There's a metric here that we kind of use too, right? For each 2 paralegals that you hire, you probably need to hire something in a specialized support area. It's really hard to say that it's exactly this kind of a person or this kind of a person. It depends on your firm makeup, how you're doing it. But think of it from that perspective, right? So to go back to the beginning, if we hire 5 attorneys, we're probably going to have to hire at least 2 paralegals. That would obviously be driven by intake. So we'll have additional intake hires, and then we'll have specialized support or additional support items. So it's kind of like it's a waterfall. It's the same exact waterfall that we kind of use throughout this whole process. That's the people side. If we look at capacity, so this is a key one too, because if you think of an individual, what do you want your attorney to be? 100% utilized, right? Everybody wants to be 100% utilized. Well, guess what? The world is not a perfect world. Nobody is 100% utilized. We use as a goal somewhere between 90 to 95%, right? If we start getting to 95% or more, it starts to raise the flags that our current team can't absorb the caseload, right? That is super important, because what does that lead to? It leads to burnout, leads to turnover. You get turnover, all of a sudden you're hiring even just to keep where you are, right? Versus hiring for growth. So that's a key metric, and keep that in mind, the 95% utilization, right? That's where we really want to say, hey, it's time to start hiring, right? And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means from a start hiring concept, because it's not that I want to start hiring there. It's I want to have a person in the seat doing the job. So if we go to the next slide, Tony talked about 6 numbers, right, that are really important to this forecast. He walked through the first 4 of them. I'm going to talk a little bit right now about the last 2 levers. And they really are levers, because you, as you know your firm better than anybody else, right? You will be able to affect these 2 numbers, and they do have an impact on the forecast, okay? One is growth rate. How aggressively do I want to grow, right? At Sterling, we start with a 3% per month growth factor, right? Doesn't sound like much, but 3% a month consistently is a really significant growth. If you want to be super aggressive and you say, hey, I'm at the early stages and I can grow my firm 5% or 10% per month, awesome. Keep in mind, it's not a feeling, right? You got to trust it, right? You can say that you want to grow 10% anytime you want, but unless your numbers in the waterfall and moneyballing process tell you that you're actually doing that, that's where the actuals come in. It's really hard to just focus on feelings, right? So trust the numbers, watch your numbers and trust your numbers. The second one that you can change is the seasonality. Particularly with small firms, you definitely feel peaks and valleys, okay? Certain months, certain times of the year are going to be stronger than others, and certain are going to be weaker than others. As you get to be larger and larger, that may smooth out a bit, but even at Sterling's current state, we feel a couple valleys. It's really one valley, and that's in the November and December timeframe, right? So we see that our case volume slows in November and December. a whole bunch of reasons for that, and we can go through all the history of what that is. But the point of this is you have to, or you should try to build in some seasonality in your forecast so that you don't react to a blip, right? You don't want to react to a blip. You want to react to trends, right? That's the key thing. And that's what that second bullet kind of points out. So really, those are the two key additional factors that we want to watch and levers that we can pull. And I'm going to now jump in a little bit to actually what we call finding the window. It's step 3 of the metrics of the forecast process. And what we've done is we've highlighted a section here that's in amber, and it kind of says, hey, this is when you have to have people in the seats. So we'll go through the demo shortly, but basically we filled out some information. It pulled out and it said, well, geez, you're in the yellow, or the amber in this case. It's probably, you got to have some more people because you're going to burn people out and you're going to experience turnover and you're going to have a whole other issue. What this means is not when you hire or when you start hiring, it's when that person is fully productive. So what does that mean? There's 2 types of attorneys that I like to think about that you can hire. You can hire an experienced family law attorney who's been there, done that, knows exactly what they're doing, knows how to handle a case, knows how to bill, knows how to, you name it, right? There's also
we call
fresh
those
graduates.
the unicorns, and they're impossible to find. Yeah. Is that right?
They are much harder to find. So that's actually another point that how long does it take to find each one of these pieces? But yeah, you're right. Everything that I'm going to talk about today, the rest of as we go through this model and the demo is not, hey, it's time for me to start thinking about hiring somebody, but it's that person needs to be in the seat and actually producing. Okay. So that's super key to remember and keep that in mind. This is true for kind of almost any firm, right? It doesn't matter how big you are or how small you are. You're going to have these exact same issues or opportunities, right? An experienced attorney anywhere isn't going to be better at one firm versus another. They're going to come in and it's going to take them a couple months, but they'll be ready to go. Fresh graduates, the exact same way. So that's super important. So if you think back to our 4 points, right? Check, forecast, find, and protect. This is that protect piece. This is where you have to take a little bit of risk, right? Because you need to build out a forecast for your business. You need to learn that forecast. You need to trust that forecast. And once you trust that forecast, then you can say, hey, as long as I'm within these windows or this range, I'm going to be able to go and hire that next person, right? I'm going to make the decision for my business today, which might be 3 months in advance. It might be 8 months in advance. Here's the key metric that we watch. It's labor as a percent of revenue. Okay. So, and by labor, I'm really specifically talking about attorneys, paralegals, intake, and support, right? It's those 4 groups of people. And when we set metrics, we try to keep at about 60% of revenue as our labor cost. Again, it's just a metric that you got to keep in the back of your mind to know, hey, am I overspending? And it's not going to mean that you're going to continue to spend that 65 or 70%. You want to get that number back down to 60 and kind of keep it around that 60% number. Okay. That's super important for the business and super important for you to make sure that you're hiring people at the right time and for the right time. If you can show that you're confident in it and you can show that your actuals actually reflect what your forecast is, your team's going to see that. Your team's going to trust you. They're going to see that you just hired an attorney, but they're going to know there's a reason that you hired that attorney, right? It's not to take work away from them. It's to plan for the future, right? And that cultural payoff is huge. You can't even put a number on it, right? Because it eliminates or really lowers your turnover. Because turnover is a whole other issue with a law firm. You lose an attorney, you're way behind the 8 ball, right? Not only do you not have somebody in that seat, but you got to go find somebody and take 2 to 4 months maybe to get them ready to go. So keep that in mind. You have to be willing to take that financial dip, but with the forecast model, you have the confidence that you can do that and you will recover from that very quickly.
Just one thing to add.
Yeah.
One thing to add is as it relates to the forecast, because like it might sound daunting and like maybe you understand it and but your team doesn't. So like part of your job as the leader of your firm is like bring them along through the process
Yeah.
so that you can get the cultural payoff. So one thing Todd does really well is every 2 weeks we review the forecast with all the departments within the organization, and we review how have we performed, how is the trending, is there anything that we need to know to adjust the forecast, and we do it as a team. That way the team understands what we're doing, the team understands how we're making decisions, and like that's really what leadership looks like through forecast is how are you communicating this to the team and essentially teaching them how this works so that they can participate, and then they're less likely to feel on an island when they're at really high capacity numbers, or they're going to start understanding how the business flow works, and you're going to have a very different culture as a result of being open and sharing the information and talking to the team through how it works. We're a significantly larger organization than we were when we started. And the more we've done that and done it well, the better the firm has performed versus being more closed off and less informative. Those years we performed less, we performed worse and at a lower level. And the culture was more difficult. So like there's that might sound like a small nuance, but it's actually one of the biggest magical pieces of this is like, how do you bring the team along in it and have them help own it and drive it and participate, because that's where magic happens culturally.
All right. So we've talked a little bit about the, kind of what the inputs are and what's important to us. One of the key things I want to talk about is how this model kind of works. So you'll see the two key metrics that are there with zeros right now are that monthly revenue target and the average case value. And these are the things that Tony talked about. And let's put in, I think we said like a $4 million firm. So say $300,000 a month, that would get you about $3.5 to $4 million. Average case value, I think let's put in like $8,500. I think it depends on your case mix and all that kind of stuff, but let's just throw an $8,500 in there. So then look what happens, right? It calculates the targets for you, right? As Tony mentioned and he walked through. So, and then you put your actuals in there, which we've got some actuals kind of plugged in here, and you see, hey, how am I doing, right? That's awesome. That's that snapshot. That's that point in time. That's that, here's what we're doing today. Here's what we've done yesterday, and here's what we're doing today. Now we're going to talk about the forecast piece, right? So let's jump into the next tab, and this will show us, it pulls forward that monthly revenue target. It pulls forward that average case value, the 300,000 and the 8,500. Let's put an average case length in here. You can obviously do this based on what your case types are and what your case history is. Let's put 10 months in there just for now. And then, active files, we've historically kind of said 45 is kind of a decent number to start with. So let's throw 45 in there. Those are all kind of the key first metrics. The next two lines here that you see here are the growth rate and the seasonality, right? And, we've kind of front end loaded these with just kind of 3% growth kind of throughout the year, a little bit less in January. And then seasonality is the next one. You look at seasonality, and we basically got 1 for seasonality, which means there's really no ups and downs until you get to the November, December timeframe. These are levers that you can switch at any point in time that you want, right? If you wanted to say, hey, I'm going to grow 5% for the first 3 months of the year, and then I'm going to go down to 3% later, you can do that. And this will automatically go back and recalculate the numbers. And ultimately, what you'll see at the end here is kick out, here's how many attorneys I have to have, right? So if we do that, we just unhid that one section. Let's go and change the growth rate just for kicks, right? In April, right now, just kind of focus on that April column and change that to 5%. See all those numbers change. Actually, that was probably 500. Put 0.05 because otherwise it'll look really big. But you saw how the numbers changed, right? That's the key thing that I wanted to point out is this is an interactive model. So if you feel like your business, you want to be more aggressive and you want to grow faster, go ahead and put that in. So let's undo that change here. So we get back to the 3%. And then, we can see how that then moved back to where it was. So these step ones are really the check your current health, right? We're not going to spend any more time talking about those. What I want to talk about is the step twos here that you'll see. There's some hidden columns or hidden rows here that we'll unhide these kind of one at a time and kind of walk through them a little bit. What this is doing is this is your forecast. So where do I think I need to be? Where do I think I'm going to be from a total monthly case perspective? That's what that first section is. That's your caseload. Second one then talks about how many people. So if I want to have that many cases and I have, 6 attorneys in this case, what happens? Look at what happens in the May through the August timeframe. Everything turns amber or red, right? My utilization, that final number in that bottom row, is over 100%. What does that mean? That means that your attorney is more than 100% utilized. Guess how many attorneys like that? They'll like it for a short period of time, but they aren't going to like it for a long period of time, right? So this is where the strength of this model comes in, where it says, hey, by month of May, I'm going to start burning out my attorneys. So think back to our model of the unicorn versus the new grad, right? If I'm going to go hire unicorns, and that's just what I want to do because I'm at that stage in my firm, I got to hire somebody 2 to 4 months in advance of that, right? So I'm probably starting to hire that in January, if not February at the very latest, so that I can get that person onboarded in, let's say, in March, and they learn my firm, they learn our processes, whatever, through March and April. May they're hitting the ground running, and I can say, yep, now I've got 7 attorneys, right? And that would change my numbers significantly. So that's the power of this model, is it tells you when you have that issue, but it indicates the key thing to keep in mind is it doesn't say start hiring then, because every firm, every area of the country, every, you name it, they're all different, right? It might take me 2 months to find somebody in Illinois, but it might take me 6 months to find somebody in Nebraska or whatever, right? So you have to understand that process of who you hire and how it takes to hire. So those are kind of the key things. That's the power of this model. The inputs that you have are very small, right? It's really, really small inputs. We talked about 6 things, right? You put those in, you make sure you get your growth rate, what you want to kind of focus on and how you want to get there. And that'll get you to the right magic number of here's what I need to hire. This isn't going to work day one, right? It's not going to be like, oh, wow, I know all the answers, right? It's going to take a while, right? Because you're going to learn how your business works. You're going to really get your seasonality knocked down. You're going to understand your growth rate. As you get better understandings of all of those things, this becomes like the crystal ball. And it really stops, that coin flip, right, that Tyler was talking about. And you don't have to just say, what do I feel like today? Should I hire or shouldn't I hire? You can go back to here and you can go, I love when, I get a request from our team that says I need to hire an attorney. And we go back to this and we say, well, should we? Yeah, looks like all of our metrics are showing that we're in the right spot. Therefore, yeah, we needed somebody yesterday. We should have hired somebody yesterday.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for presenting and being here. Everyone is on the call today. Really appreciate your time. I hope it was valuable. It sounds like it was. If you have any questions, please reach out to us and we will see you on the next one.